Awesome. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here on the East Coast still. Uh, my name is James Kingsley. I've been kicking around the e-learning industry for some time now, and I am currently the senior technology architect for eLearning Brothers. A lot of folks are very familiar with our templates, but we also have a lot of custom development that we do as well, as indicated on our website. Where we do everything from needs analysis to instructional design, development, and the parts I play in are normally the more technology end of that. And so please consider us for your e-learning development needs. I am also a blogger on the eLearning Brothers website. So you can come there and see more tips about how to improve your e-learning using technology. And I am the co-founder of ReviewMyElearning.com. So today's plan is we're going to talk about Storyline and some of the more advanced techniques in Storyline. A lot of times in Storyline, you're posed with a problem. A client needs a particular interaction, and they want to score that interaction. And luckily, Storyline is powerful enough and has the triggers and the variables where it will let you mix and match some of the built-in features of it to create these much more complex interactions and still be able to score them or make them even more complex there. So to begin with, let's see, let me double check because I see a couple of questions there. Are we good, Thomas?
Yeah, it looks like we're good for now. I'm still kind of going through too.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to jump in. Hopefully you are already somewhat familiar with the triggers and the variables in Storyline. If not, you'll get a brief introduction of it here because we'll be using them. And also, even though maybe the example I'm showing you doesn't quite match what your needs are, I think by seeing some of these types of examples and exploring different solutions for them, because sometimes there's more than one way, to solve the issue, it'll give you some information that you can use going forward in your projects. Even if it's not this exact thing, it might spark some ideas for you. So I'm going to jump into this one here, and this is sort of an example of what a software simulation interaction might be, or a website simulation interaction. And the goal here is that we want the learner to be able to input both their name and a comment in these fields, and then we want to score them on that. So right now, I've already got this set up that they can input, and we're going to save the text to the comment variable, and here they can input, and we'll save the text to the username variable. But as you see, we have a results slide at the end of this. And so we need to find a way to grade this to see whether or not they inputted those fields correctly. So one of my favorite ways of doing this is that to create this as a free-form question type, but we're going to use a pick one free-form question type. And the goal here is we're going to use a trigger to evaluate these two fields. And if the student has answered them correctly, then we'll pick the correct box on the side. So let me just jump in, and rather than try to explain all day long, let me just go ahead and do it, because that's what you're here to see. So first thing I need to do is, if we're going to do a pick one, we need to have something to pick. So I'm putting these on screen now, but just keep in mind it would be off screen in the future. So this one is going to be my wrong box if they get it wrong. And then I'm just going to copy and paste that. And this will be my correct box if they get it correct. So now I have two options on there to be selected, and I'm going to change this to a free-form question. And it's going to be a pick one. and it's asking me to choose the different options. So I have my wrong option, my correct option, and I'm going to say OK on that. So if I go back to my slide view now, we can see that it's added all the typical things related to a question. It has the correct and incorrect. And now also, when I come back to my results slide, it's been added to that results slide. There's a pick one there. So that means it's going to be a part of my quiz. It's also created some states for these objects too. So we can see it's going to put the little glow around them if they're selected. So let's start. We have a button here that the student's going to click after entering these. So what we want that button to do is to change the state. And right now, just to play around with it here, we're going to go ahead and change the state of correct to selected when the user clicks the button. Then we're also going to submit the current interaction when the user clicks the button. So let's kind of take a look at how that's going to work. So now when I hit submit, it's going to highlight and select the correct answer here, and it's going to basically hit the submit button for us, the second submit button. I guess I should have changed this to a different button to make it clear. So I'm going to hit submit. There. We can see it selected that button, it highlighted it, and it marked it correct when it submitted it. So now we need some logic on there because we don't want it to always select the correct one. We only want it to select the correct one if they've typed in the right things. So we're going to add some conditions to this trigger. We want to change the state of correct to selected if the username is equal to James and the comment is equal to meh. And those could be whatever you wanted them to be, obviously. And so now I'll say OK. Now let's see what happens when we play this slide. So if I try to hit the submit button before I've typed anything in there, I'm going to get this button that says I must complete before submitting. And if I type something in that's not the correct answer, right now I'm going to get invalid answer because we still haven't selected anything on the side. We'll take a look at that in a second. So I'm going to say my name is James. My comment is meh. I'll hit submit, and there we go. Everything evaluated correctly. So it marked this as it selected this one and submitted the question, and it came back as correct. So now we need to handle incorrect. And you could do that by creating sort of the opposite of this, to say select the incorrect one if the username is not equal to, and this is not equal to, etc. But really, the quickest and easiest way to get this done is we know that right now, this answer is wrong. Like in the current state, if they haven't typed anything in there, they've already got it wrong. If they type anything but these two, then they're going to get it wrong. So let's just set the initial state of this when it first loads to be selected. So now when the slide starts, they're already wrong. And they have to fill in these boxes to get it correct. So now when I start the slide, I can see that this is already selected. So when I hit submit, it's going to tell me that I'm incorrect. And of course, you would want to take this, slide it off the screen so that the learner doesn't see those boxes. So let me do the entire project now, and we can show how that's getting scored on the end. So if I type in the incorrect and hit submit, and then I'm going to skip past that one for now. And where's my result slide? Oh, I can't get to my result slide. Oh, I know why, because I skipped right past it. Let's try it again. I said this slide. It's always when you're live that you start making mistakes. All right, so I'm going to get it wrong. And I'm going to get this one wrong. And now we can see that my score was a 0 on there. It doesn't really prove anything though, does it? Let me see if I can get it right. Ugh. Let's go back and try that again. Preview the project. I am James. My comment is meh. That's correct. That was incorrect. So now I got that one right, and that's 50% of my quiz. Any questions so far on how we did that, or issues that you might have around that? Let me pop out the questions panel here and see. No questions so far, it looks like. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the question box in there. All right, for my next one, what we're going to do is, oh, looks like maybe some questions now. Yes, the question that would definitely go into the LMS. Well, the score would go to the LMS as part of this results slide there. That was for Susan. Can you do this with a varying comment? That's from Wanda. I believe what you mean is, could we have more than one correct answer here? My example form may not be the best for evaluating, because when we're doing a comment form, you don't really know what people are going to type in, as a comment. The only way that this would be a realistic situation is if beforehand we had told them, you must always include the word meh in your comment form. So there are a couple of ways that you could do it. You could build several of these if-then statements. So you could say, right now we have if it equals that and the comments that, but you could also say, or the comment is equal to hi. And that would give them a couple of other things. So you could keep adding other things like that there to add some variety to what the comment could be. If you got really complicated with it, then what I would do is I would send the data out to some JavaScript and have the JavaScript evaluate it, and maybe look for keywords in it. Like if they should say, these 3 things, then I would have JavaScript evaluate, and then have JavaScript come back in here and mark this correct or incorrect. But that's a more advanced topic on that. Maybe we'll do that in the next webinar. Let's see what other questions we have here. Because you don't know their name, is there a way to set it as right for typing anything? Yes, you could do that. I believe you could. Let's explore that possibility. Yes, you could, because what we know is that the current value of this variable is who are you? So you could say, if the username is not equal to who are you? And then we would know that they changed that, they edited it in some way. You don't know what they put in there, but you know that they changed it there. So that's a great question there. Thank you, Claire. Susan asked about gradebook. Sorry, Susan, not sure what a gradebook is. Maybe you can expand upon that question a little bit more. Could I show the trigger for wrong answer again? Yes, I can. So basically, we did not use a trigger for wrong answer. What we did is we told it that we want the initial state to be selected. So that means that as soon as the slide loads, this is already in a selected state. So that basically the question will be graded as wrong no matter what, because this is already selected, unless they complete this and this logic here decides to select the other box. Hope that answers your question. Can we make unfilled equal wrong and filled equal right? Yeah, I think that would be very similar to what I just did, where I said if it's not equal to who are you. If it's empty, then I think what we use is if it's not blank. I think there's an option in there. There is not, but let's see. There's not, but I think this would be blank. So we would be saying if it's not blank, then let's go ahead and select the correct box. That actually would be a good way to expand on the other one as well, to say if it's not blank and the username does not equal who are you, because that way we know that they entered something and they didn't just delete the words who are you. So that would be a good way to kind of double up on that one to make sure that they were doing it right. How do you make the default submit button and gray border invisible? All right, do that. So the default submit button, as we saw, because in this case we already have a submit button on the screen for the comment, we want to get rid of this one down here. So to get rid of that one down there, we would go to our slide properties, and because it's a question type, it automatically unchecked these next and submits, but we can turn them back on and have a next button if we wanted to, or no buttons at all down there. As far as removing the gray border around the outside, that's going to go a little beyond today's, but basically there is a, let me find my tab. Oops, open another window. There are options in here to change the player colors. And so what you would do is just change those colors to match the background, basically. There are some complex ways to make them transparent and stuff, but I find that the easiest way is just to turn them, like if the background of your web page is going to be black, just to make all these colors black, or if the background's going to be white, to make all the colors white, that type thing. Making them transparent is kind of hard to do. Hey, but you know what? Speaking of those colors, I'm getting all sidetracked now. I should get back to this. Never mind. All right. I was going to say, over on eLearning Enhanced, we have this fun articulate color thing that lets you create random colors and download them for your player. So you might check that out over on elearningenhanced.com. Storyline Colorizer. Is there a way to evaluate options that are case sensitive? Yes. When I say this is equal to or not equal to, there's a choice to say it's equal to, and it would have to be the exact case, or equal to, ignore the case. So that's how you would do that. Please do that in the next webinar. I'm not sure which one, but I've covered a lot of things. All right, that one's complex. Could you use %name? Not sure where she wants to use that one. Can you show us the variables in the variables table? Yes, I can do. Name as the variable. Yes, you could use that as the variable. Yes. All right, so I can show you my variables that I'm using. These were created by Storyline. They're all part of that results slide. And here's the three that I have in here: the comment and the username and the timer. And we're going to get to the timer here on the next interaction. So let me go ahead and jump to the next interaction. And so for that one, what we want to do is I've already set up this fun little drag and drop game. I say fun, but you know, this is an example of what an interaction could be like. By the way, here's that colorizer because somebody asked me to go ahead and send it. So elearningenhanced.com, and there's this tab, Articulate Colorizer. And so you can do, you can pick your colors, and you can be like, oh, I want all my text to be red, and I want the base color to be blue, and then hit preview, and it will generate what that would look like for you. Or, and this is fun, you can just hit I feel lucky, and it'll just load random colors for you. And you can also control, so you see it goes from dark to light there. You can control how dark to light that gets. So that's flat. Yeah. Sorry, I digest. So let's jump back here and let me show you this interaction as it is now. So it's just a simple little drag and drop where we want the learner to pick out the 4 words to make a phrase from these 5 words down here. So this one's pretty straightforward. It's wet behind the ears. Submit. Boom. So that could be fun for you know, a couple things, or helping people remember stuff. But it'd make it more fun and make it more into a game and create more immediacy around it if we could add a timer to it. Because time pressure is one way to create that gamification effect and to get people more engaged into it. So there's actually a lot of ways to build a timer into Storyline. And so I want to explore a few of those so that we can get a feel for the different ways to do it. And I think in the process, you're going to see some cool things that you might not have realized that you could do with Storyline. So I'm going to begin with really just the simplest way to do it. Oh, by the way, I already have a layer here called timeout. Okay, that's going to let them know that they took too long to do it. Okay. So I'm going to start with really one of the simplest ways to do it, but it's not really my favorite way to do it. So I'm going to insert a new layer, and for this one, I'm going to call this the progress layer. And on this one, what I want to do is I want to create a progress bar that goes across the bottom to let the learner know that that time is counting down for them. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a little bar down here at the bottom. There. And now I want to animate that in. So there's a couple of different ways you can animate things in. If I go to my animations, the one I'm going to choose for this is motion path, and I'll explain why in just a second. And I want it to go, oh, hold on. Let me delete that motion path because I got ahead of myself. I need to set it off the screen because the motion path is going to bring it into the screen here. So now I'm going to add my motion path, tell it to go to the right, and I'll set it right there. Then I can tell it how long. So I want this interaction to go for 20 seconds. So I'm going to set it for 20 seconds. So now when I come back down to my base layer, I'm going to add, just sort of to illustrate how all this would work, I'm going to add a start button on here, and I'm going to set it to show that layer. Show the layer progress when the user clicks the button. So in real life, you'd probably have like a big thing covering this so that the learner couldn't see the words yet, and it would say, you know, you only have 20 seconds to arrange these words into a phrase, click start to begin. When they hit start, it's gonna, that layer, that would disappear and it would kick off our progress bar. So let me show you what that looks like with the progress bar now. and then we'll talk about why we don't want to use a progress bar. So here we are. Progress is creeping in. And one thing you might notice is that it came in very slow, and now it's going very fast. And when it gets to the end, it goes very slow. And that's because of the easing that it's doing. And all the animations in Storyline do have easing on them, or pretty much all the animations have easing. I guess I shouldn't say all, but pretty much all of them do. And we're going to be able to turn it off on this one. That's why I chose motion path, but it's harder to turn off on other items. So let's go on back to that layer, and we're going to choose that and go to our animations. And under the path options, we can see the easing, the direction, and we'll say none. So that's going to just let it slide in at the right speed. You can do that for path animations. You can't shut that off for other animations. Like I said, not all of them do it, but pretty much any that you would want to use to illustrate time are going to have some sort of a easing effect to them. And so it's a little, I think, misleading to the student when they see that it's going slower now, when in fact, time is the same no matter how fast that animation goes. The other issue with using animation is that you can only go up to 59 seconds. So I'm typing in 60, but I only get 59 seconds in there. In real life, this might be enough. A little progress bar and 20 seconds, is enough for this interaction. But you're going to find a lot of interactions where that's not really enough time. Now you might be wondering, well, when the time is up, how do we let the student know the time is up? And so for that, we're going to add a trigger to show the layer, timeout, when, and this is one of the newer updates that Storyline had, when the animation completes. And then we can choose which object is being animated and which animations. Now that is a very powerful trigger. You can use that to trigger the next animation. There's a lot of things you can do with the animation triggers in Storyline. In this case, what we were saying is basically when this 20 seconds is up, when this thing is all the way over to the side, then we want to pop up that layer. So let's take a look at how that's going to play out. So I hit my start. Now we see that it's moving in at a constant rate. Maybe I should have said 10 seconds to save us a little time staring at this. Guess I could look at a few questions here. Thomas, anything really pertinent there? Oh, wow, that was a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's a very big question.
You have an echo, Thomas.
Let's see if I can fix that.
All right, so I'll show the color thing. Will the widgets that are available from eLearn Enhanced website be made available to ELB subscribers? I'm not 100% sure about that. I know that they were talking about moving all those over, and I believe that they sent an email out to all the eLearn Enhanced subscribers, or eLearn Enhanced subscribers. Yes.
Yeah. We are planning on making those widgets available, I think actually to everyone. But we're still working out how we're actually going to stick that in and make it make sense for people to be able to come find them. So for now, there are a few that are just on eLearning Enhanced that you can just access that way. But keep an eye out for that. We'll probably make some more announcements and things once those become available.
Sure. Okay. All right. So we see here that the timeout popped up when the animation stopped. Yay. Somebody did ask that I show how to cover those on there, and so there's a couple of different ways you could do it. Here would be one easy way, and that would be to actually make the start button really big, and then add another trigger to the button. This is to hide this object or change the state of the button to hidden when the user clicks it. So that's the really easy way to do it. Another way to do it would be to create a group of items on there. So you could have this and maybe a panel, kind of like the one I have on the timeout here, that are covering it. And then back here we have the trigger to hide the button, but we could also add that, hide the button, hide the panel, hide, whatever else that you put on there. And then the third way to do it, because like I said, there's tons of different ways to do things in Storyline. The third way you could do it is you could actually make another layer on here and have that layer be, call it start or something, and have that layer. Here, why don't I just go ahead and throw one on there. Oops. So we'll call that start. I'll come back here and get my button. Put that on here, and I can get rid of this trigger. Insert. Put a little shape behind there. There we go. Now, back on the base level, the first thing we'd want to do when this slide starts is to show our start layer. Show the start layer when the timeline of the slide starts. So we don't see it on here right now, but whoops. But when we preview, it'll be right there. And then when you hit that, it disappears. Now the reason why it disappears, by the way, is because on your layer settings, by default, they're set to hide other slide layers. And that's normally what you want to happen. You only want to show one layer at a time. Sometimes you do want to hide or show other layers, and so you just come in here and uncheck that. But right now, it's actually working out very well for us because when the progress layer comes in, it's set to hide the other layers. So when our trigger on the start said show the layer progress, and then when the progress came on, it automatically hid the start layer there. All right, so that was one method, and like I said, that's one of the easier, kind of straightforward methods on there. Not a favorite of mine because there's some limitations to it. And one thing I've discovered is when sometimes I'll go into something knowing those limitations, but then later I'm like, oh, I wish I could do this, or I wish I could do that, and so now I regret having done that. So I don't use that one as often, but it is very capable for those simple, straightforward ones. So let me take a look at, or let me show you a couple of other methods for that. I'm trying to get my list up here. So I'm going to add some text here at the bottom of that that's going to show the time remaining. And I'm copying and pasting from another presentation just to save time here. So here I'm going to show the time that's remaining. As we mentioned in my variables, I already have a timer set to 20 on there. And so the nice thing about this being a variable like that is that we could change it to whatever we want. So as a matter of fact, I'm going to change it to 10 here just so we can speed things up in our presentation. So now we'll have a display on here of the timer counting down. And here's one of the kind of oldie but goodie ways of doing a timer. I call it the boxes method. And so I created another layer called boxes, and I'm going to insert, you guessed it, a box. So there's my little box, and I'm going to set a trigger on that box. I'm going to say when that box appears, well, actually, I always get the when. I think about it first rather than the action. The action that I want it to do is I want it to adjust our variable timer. I'm going to subtract 1 from that timer when the timeline of our box, of our rectangle starts. So in other words, as soon as that rectangle comes on the screen, I want to subtract 1 from our variable timer. And then the other thing I need to do here is I'm going to change my start button instead of showing the layer progress to show the layer boxes. That way we can illustrate this. So just to show it a little bit here, when I come up, we can see in the background there that my timer is at 10. As soon as this box came on, it changed it to 9. Now, a timer that is not just yet, but if I come here and I take that box and I say, I want it to come on after 1 second. So now, oops, I grabbed the wrong thing. There we go. So now it's going to, this timeline is going to run, and at 1 second, that box is going to come on, and then that timer is going to drop by 1. So to subtract another one from it, I'm going to copy and paste that box. And I'm going to move it to the 2 second mark. Then I'll paste another one. And I'll move that one. I don't know what order I have these in now. Should have been paying attention. That one's going to the 3 second mark. So now if we preview this, we'll see we start at 10, and then as each box comes in, there, it counted down to 7. Now I turned them off at that point, but if you actually keep these all the way, then you can sort of make a little progress bar out of it. So you could see if those are stacked up, or you could do them along the bottom. The nice thing about, in this case, I'm just using simple boxes, but you could use images of anything you want. Maybe you want to have little cats, when all your cats are gone, or all the mice are there. However you wanted to do it, this is open to lots of different things. And also, you could animate those in. I'm just popping them in, but you could add some animation to them so that they would fly in from the side. I'm doing it when the timeline starts, but you could do the reverse and have them all on the slide to begin with, and then pop them off the slide and say when the timeline ends for that object, then get rid of it. Or I'm sorry, when the timeline ends, then subtract from here. So now let me go ahead and do some more of these just so that we can hopefully get to 10. And they're probably going to be in the wrong order, but that's okay for our demo. I just want to illustrate how we would use our trigger. So that gets me not enough. This will get me plenty. And this is looking ugly. We're going to end up subtracting a lot. Anybody been keeping up with how many I have on there? How did I rotate those? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Tell you what, let's change our timer to 5 seconds. All right, so now what we have is it's going to count down real quick. And we'll start getting into negative numbers down here. I know this is ugly, but we're just practicing right now. So now I've got my timer working with a visual cue on there. So what I want to do is, again, I need to show this box when the timer gets to 0. So back on my base layer, we're going to create a trigger here to show the layer timeout when a variable changes. We're going to say the timer. Now, what this would do is every time that variable changes, it's going to show that layer. And that's not what we want to do. We only want to show that layer when the timer equals 0. So I wish that there was a simpler way to do that, to say right in here, show layer timeout when the variable equals something. We can do it, we just have to add a condition on here. So we're going to say when the timer is equal to 0. So it's going to evaluate this every time the variable timer changes. So when it goes from 5 to 4 to 3, it's going to check and see, is it 0? Is it 0? When it is 0, then it's going to pop up our layer for us. So I'll hit start. 5, 4, 3, 2, boom. There we go. And you notice the timer stopped. And the reason why the timer stopped is because of this hiding other layers thing again. So the timeout layer is set to hide other layers. So as soon as it popped up, it hid our boxes layer, which means none of this code is running anymore. None of these triggers are running anymore once it's hidden. So that stopped the timer right at 0. All right, let me do a check-in on some questions here. I still have a couple of other ways to handle.
Yeah, we had somebody who wanted to see how to insert the variable on the screen again, just to go over that again real quick.
Oh yeah, sure. I took a shortcut and just copied and pasted it on there. If you can remember this little formula, the percent and percent on there, that's the easiest way for me. So let me just insert a new text box. And so if you remember that it's percent and you remember your timer variable, then you can just type it in like this, and that's going to display it on the screen. If, on the other hand, you don't remember all your variable names, which is common when you start getting a whole lot, then you're going to insert a text field. While your cursor is in there, go back to the Insert tab, and then it's under Reference. And that gives you all your variables there. And so then you can select it from there and hit OK. You see it goes in there with the exact same format, but you end up using that one a lot because you don't remember all your variable names. And also, I use Captivate a fair amount too, and Captivate has a slightly different system for it, and so sometimes I forget which one I'm in and which I need to use. So sometimes I end up using that method as well too. All right.
And one question from earlier talking about the hiding the base layer until the user clicks, but going back to the slide, and it's the question from Kendra. I don't know if you can see that there.
I'm using something similar to what you've done. There's the clicks previous layer doesn't show again. Oh, huh. Yeah, that's interesting, Kendra. Maybe you can email us offline on that one and send us your file or something, because what she's saying is that she has a similar trigger like this one to show the start layer when the slide starts, and that apparently it works the first time, but not the second time.
Later. Okay.
Yeah.
So you can send that question into support@elearningbrothers.com. And that goes for if you're having questions with any of our templates, you can send in an email to that address, and we'll do our best to help you through.
One thing I have seen sometimes with Storyline is things that are set right here at the very beginning. Sometimes triggers don't get evaluated fast enough to control them. In this case, I think you'd probably be okay because you're just showing a layer. But I have seen, like, if you have a trigger here that says hide the word rain, when the timeline starts, because the word rain came in at the beginning of the timeline, if you had a lot of triggers, it might not evaluate that fast enough to hide it quickly there. And so the solution for that is usually just to pull that off a little bit. So if you just pull it like, a quarter of a second away from the beginning of the start, then it gives the code enough time to run and just be like, oh yeah, I guess I should hide that. Because that's how code sounds when it talks to itself. Somebody mentioned if you had a 3-minute timer, those boxes would get crazy. You're right. The nice thing about it, though, is once you've kind of built one of these out, you can copy that layer and paste it somewhere else, and you've got it on hand. So I've seen where somebody, might have one of these with a couple hundred boxes on it, and even though their timer is only set to 5, they've got all those boxes, and that's because they've reused it from somebody else or from somewhere else, either another course or in their own. Another way to sort of have less boxes too is if we didn't want to show them the whole time. I mentioned that you could do a trigger when the timeline ends, is you could do both. You can have it on here and say when the timeline starts, subtract 1, when the timeline ends, subtract 1, and then set this to be 1 second long. And so that would subtract 1 at the beginning, subtract 1 at the end. That really works better if you don't plan on showing this to the student. Again, a lot of times people push this off to the side because they don't necessarily need the student to see it. They just want to be able to track it down. I mean, we're showing them this number here anyway, so that's another way to handle that. All right, so let me come back over here and see. Oops. Now another one, and this one's I think gets a star for simplicity, is what I call looping layers. And so I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to call this one looper 1. And on that layer, just so we can see something in action, I'm going to put this little circle. I'm going to set the layer to be 1 second long. And I'm going to add a trigger that says to adjust our variable, timer, subtract 1, when the timeline ends of looper. So in other words, when this layer is done, we want to subtract 1 from there. So that means if I come back to my base layer, oops, nope, I forgot I had a start layer. If I come to my start layer and I change this to show my looper 1, there. So it was up, and when the timeline ended, it subtracted 1. all four of all these just changed when it did that. So that got us 1 second. That took 1 second off of our timer. Okay. So what if we had 2 of these? So I'm going to copy that layer, duplicate it. I'll call this one looper 2. I'm going to come back to my first looper layer, and what I want to do is I want to just keep bouncing between these 2 layers. To illustrate that point, I will change this to red, and I'm going to say that when the timeline ends, I want to show the other layer. So when this layer gets done, I want to show the other looper 2 layer. And when looper 2 gets done, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to show looper 1. So it's just going to keep bouncing back and forth between these 2 layers. Red, blue, and we see each time it changes, our numbers are going down on the side here. So now we want a way to stop that. And so, now why didn't this happen? Why did that not fire off? I think we might need to move that, because I think that what's happening is it's going so fast, it's showing that layer. Yeah. So what we'll do here is we'll come in here and we'll say show that layer when the timeline ends if our timer is greater than 0. We'll do the same thing here. If our timer is greater than 0. And I think what's happening here is this is one of those cases where the triggers are running so fast and layers are showing and hiding so fast that the timeout box isn't really getting a chance to show itself and shut everything down in time. So let's see what happens now. There we go. So that's one of my favorites, just for the sheer simplicity of it. You don't have to build 100 boxes. You don't have to create complex animations or anything. And you could create some animations on here to make this look more like a timer, if you will. You could have a little progress bar or spinner or something that's going.
We have a question in from Chuck asking, can you still use the drag and drop on the other layer if they're going that fast?
I believe we can. Yep. Oh, timed out. 5 seconds is not long enough to answer that question.
So
not even wrong. Almost. Hey, I got it. Yeah, incorrect.
You can use it, getting it right on the other hand.
Yeah. All right, so we're almost out of time. I want to show one more method just real quick, and then
we'll just kind of finish up with some of the questions at the end.
I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one, partly because it's not a favorite of mine, but I just wanted
and I'm wondering if maybe with the blog that we're going to post on Monday, that's also going to have the recording of this webinar, if we might be able to maybe just include this sample project file so that way people can kind of get in and play with it.
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for that on our blog on Monday when we kind of post the recap and everything. We'll try to include this file in there for you guys to mess with.
So this one, I'm just going to show it real quick. You see I created a new layer and I put some cue points on it. And so for this one, you would just adjust the timer, subtract 1 when the timeline reaches cue point 1. And so then you would just have to create, 20 of those. That's one of the reasons why it's not my favorite. The other is you see it's kind of hard to get a cue point exactly at I thought I was on the 2-second mark, but apparently I was on 1.98. So that's another way to do it. And basically that would, when you show that layer, when the timeline hits that cue point, it would run your trigger and it would subtract from it there. So that's another way to do it. Then I guess the nice thing about that is if you decide you want to give people twice as much time, you can just move that cue point, here, and that's going to give them more time. All right, so let's jump in and look at some questions.
So the one other question we had for the timer was, why is it greater than 0 rather than equal to 0?
Yeah, that's a good question. The reason why I chose that, good eye there. The reason why I chose that is because I want to show that layer when it's equal to 0, and so I only want to go to this looper when it's greater than 0. I think that probably they both would work the same, just to say that when it's equal to 0, but in my mind, I want to stop the timer when before we get to 0, basically, because I already have something happening at 0. But I think that both would probably work in the real world.
Okay.
Oh,
Uh,
my audio went down at some point, huh?
yeah. You kind of, I think maybe we're a little bit further away from your mic or something. We still have a little bit of time for questions, so get those in now before we kind of wrap up here. We have a comment from Sebastian. Equal to 0 would not work. The show layer won't trigger.
Yeah.
So,
I love trying new things. That's part of
yeah.
my thing. I love playing with stuff. So
Yeah.
let's give it a shot. Make sure it's still showing. Yeah. Okay. Oh, why did it stop there? It stopped right at 4. What did I do wrong? Oh well. Okay. Next question. What did I do wrong?
Looks like we're not getting too many other questions in.
Oh, not equal to 0. That's what it should be. Well, then it would still do it at less than 0. So when I hit -1, it would pop up that.
Then it would do it.
Yeah, it might not hit -1 because the other would show. But no. All right, folks. So as I said, I do some blogging on the what's the name of our website? eLearning Brothers.
eLearningBrothers.com.
And I also I send out tweets and I post stuff on LinkedIn, helpful little tidbits and samples of code and things like that. So please feel free to follow me on Twitter or connect with me on LinkedIn, and we will post this file up on the eLearning Brothers blog.
Yeah, so thanks again, James, for doing this. We appreciate you taking the time with us. And
hey, Bess. Sorry.
And no, it's all good. It's all good. We also appreciate all of you guys coming out and viewing the webinar with us today. We try to do these webinars pretty frequently, so if you go to elearningbrothers.com and you look at our events page, you'll be able to see our schedule there for future webinars, and we'll also try to get the word out on our social media as well. So keep an eye out. As we mentioned before, we will also try to get the recording for this webinar and also the project file to all of you guys on Monday through our blog. So keep an eye out for that as well. And we really want to be able to work with you guys. So if you have an opportunity, contact us if you want to have us help you build a solution. You can contact us at the phone number 801-796-2767, or you can always shoot us an email at support@elearningbrothers.com. We'd love to chat with you about the webinar, about possible custom solutions that we can do for you, or our templates, anything. Just feel free to send us an email in there, and we'll chat. So thanks everybody for coming out. We'll look forward to seeing you guys the next time a webinar rolls around.